Our presenters want to make sure that you have enough information to get started in cybersecurity if you're not today, but also have enough information to move to the next level in cybersecurity, and in two different ways, specifically how to implement that in your own business, and then also how to provide that as a solution to the customers that you speak to today. If you're not selling cybersecurity today, from a business perspective, you're leaving some money on the table and leaving opportunities where you can be a subject matter expert in selling these solutions to your customers. So with that, let's take a look at who is presenting today. We have Joe Richardson, who is the Senior Cybersecurity Director at Comcast. He manages our security portfolio, cybersecurity portfolio. He's been involved in many of the discussions as Comcast takes a look at strategically on the solutions around cybersecurity, how that fits within our overall portfolio and our strategy for go-to-market and how to position that. A little bit about Joe is that he has more than 25 years of experience in information technology. He has a rich tenure with experience from big companies like SunOS, Solaris, Juniper Networks, Palo Alto, and then most recently Comcast Business. He's a veteran in this space and has seen the evolution of cybersecurity. He's also seen the new era of cybersecurity and how cyber attacks today have evolved and what we need to do in order to protect ourselves. Joining us today also, we have Wayne Selk, who's the Vice President of Cybersecurity Programs and the Executive Director at the CompTIA ISAL. Now, Wayne also has more than 25 years of experience in cybersecurity. So combined today, we're bringing you more than 50 years of knowledge in this space that is so critical for us all to understand, to implement, and to help our customers protect their important assets. Wayne has also a co-author and has contributed to many publications through ConnectWise, MSP Framework, playbooks, through certifications and advanced courses. And through his leadership, he has also developed planning, managing, and developing and delivering information security deployments to help CompTIA members and their customers with sensitive business and critical data. So as we talk a little bit more about cybersecurity today, lean in a little bit more to what both Joe and Wayne are going to share with you, and feel free to ask any questions you'd like. If you have not gone down the road of starting to implement cybersecurity or including that in your business solutions as you sell to customers, feel free to ask some of those questions about where to get started, how to get started, what are the communities in which we should be a part of. And you'll hear from Wayne today talk a little bit more about a complimentary membership that CompTIA has offered to you as our DE&I partners. And that is the CompTIA ISAL community, where you can get connected with a community of cybersecurity folks and start to share and learn some best practices, learn more about what's happening in that industry and how to implement some of the best tools that are around. So with that, I'm going to ask Joe Richardson, would you mind coming up and talk to the folks today a little bit more around kind of the trends in cybersecurity, some of those scary stats that we hear about. We hear about ransoms happening. We hear about networks being shut down, all of that wonderful stuff. Why don't you take us through a little bit more about cybersecurity and some of those best practices?
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And for those of you on the West Coast, good morning to you. My name is Joe Richardson. Actually, I wanted to share some slides, Steve, if I can take control. Is that possible?
Absolutely.
All right. So, I've done a bunch of presentations. You get numbers thrown at you. You get the scary stuff that Steve has talked about. But what I wanted to do, and, I was trying to think about how can we talk about this? As a matter of fact, oops, wrong. 1 second. Get to my. All right. So let me start off by saying that I wanted to really talk about how do you live this digital life that we have today. And so that is what the theme I want to talk about, living the digital life. And one of my former companies with their security product, they literally said, our mission as providing products to the market is protecting our digital way of life. So let's just talk about that real quick. And I want to talk about the old school versus the new school, right? And so I'm going to talk about, for example, my mom, that if she was here, she'd be pissed off that I'm saying that she's 91. But my mom at 91 has practically no digital footprint at all. I think my sister and I set up an email address for her that she doesn't even know how to check. Nothing goes to that account. Almost nothing in her house is wireless. And the main reason she even has wireless in her house is so when the grandkids come by, they can actually surf the web. So she doesn't use wireless at all. She snail mails everything. Literally, my mom, if I visit her every 2 weeks, she will hand me a bunch of envelopes with stamps and ask me to drop it off at the mailbox. Or she even puts the stamped envelopes in her mailbox, so when the mailman or letter carrier comes up, they can actually take it out of the box and actually deliver it for her. And she pays her bills this way still. She does not pay anything online. As a matter of fact, during COVID, she asked me to go to the bank to deposit some money for her because she doesn't even use the ATMs. And I literally stood in line for an hour because there were 5 people in front of me and it had to be a real transaction. And so with that, my mom is coming from the old school, is very good at the physical interaction and protection. She locks her doors. She actually, you could probably not hustle her if you wanted to on the streets. But at the same time, she complains to me all the time, like, why are people calling my phone asking for money? Why are people sending me texts for bank accounts I don't actually have on her phone? And she still longs for her rotary dial. She complains all the time that she has to pay for touch tone dialing. The flip side is my daughter, who is 26 years old. My daughter is an influencer and a model. She has 160,000 plus followers on Instagram. She's also on TikTok. Everything she does is online. And even the modeling that she does at times is completely online marketing from a lot of these companies. And because of that, the internet is her brand with her name that is associated with her TikTok account and also with her Instagram account. So my daughter is very good at the digital interaction and the protections that she needs to have in place. As a matter of fact, when she was in high school, one of her friends was one of the top grocers on Google because of the stories that she was writing about herself. And that young lady had her identity stolen. And then that person started stealing her money and actually posting things on her account. And Google, I think it was actually YouTube before there was, but she was getting money from Google ads. There were no protections for this young lady, and she was never able to reclaim that account back. And so, this is one of the things my daughter has learned. And my daughter, like most of us, lives and dies by her cell phone. My daughter, at one point during COVID, had her apartment in New York where she would sometimes stay. She was doing a lot of work in LA, and then she spent 2 months in London, and she was just going back and forth, trying to continue to build her brand modeling. So this is a difference of the old school versus the new school. So now when we talk about the new school and you're living this digital life, you want to protect yourself. That is what you need to do because you want to live your best life possible, but you don't want to have it interrupted by anyone or anything that tries to steal your identity, your money, your branding, whatever have you. So one of the companies that Steve mentions is Teradyne. And at Teradyne, we focus on TQM. So I tried to break it down into what we used to call 4W1H, but it's now 5W1H, was the who, what, when, where, why, and how. So let's just start that. And I think this is how we'll build the conversation for when Wayne comes in. So the who, everybody has a responsibility to secure their data. When you walk in your house, you lock your door. When you're on your phone, you finish using your app, you close it out. Using strong passwords so somebody can't figure out your password is ABC 123. So a perfect example, my wife the other day just paid for a DoorDash delivery with Apple Pay, and I was like, why do you use Apple Pay? We've never used it before. And her main reason was that her credit card information is never passed to the end vendor. So when you start talking about her credit card number, the expiration, the CVV, none of it would ever end up at that end vendor, in DoorDash, any of their systems, simply because she was using Apple Pay. The con, of course, now is Apple Pay is the weak link. If anybody ever was able to break into Apple Pay, they would have access to my wife's credit card number. But in her eyes, when we were talking, she says, I only have to worry about them, and Google has my other credit card information. And I have to go no further. I only have two next to ring. I don't have to worry about all these different links. So that, again, the conversation of who has a responsibility to securing their data, that's you, that's everybody, especially if you have a service and you actually take in this credit card information, how do you protect it? And one of the things we also hear about and believe is that small to medium businesses don't really care about security. And I found something from a couple years ago that was from the Cisco Cybersecurity report, which talked about that, one of the myths was, for whatever reasons, SMB leadership doesn't take security and data privacy seriously. And the overwhelming take from the data was that this is far from the actual truth, and that IT organizations, in this case, SMB was 250 to 500 users, that they take data privacy and security very seriously, and that they have a lot of decision points within their organization, a lot of practices themselves in order to protect their actual data and their customers' data. So when we think about security and securing data, it literally is everybody, the large companies, the medium-sized companies, and the small companies. And so this is something that we as a society have to undertake. And so then let's get into the what. What is cybersecurity? What is information security? So cybersecurity, let's talk about body of technologies, processes, and practices. So it's not always a technology thing, designed to protect networks, devices, programs, and data, attack, damage, or unauthorized access. And sometimes it's referred to as information technology security. So if we talk about examples of this, we have your firewalls that are out there. Everybody hears about firewall. Your encryption. So for example, you have your iPhone, you do your banking like I do with Bank of America. That entire channel, that communications is completely encrypted. Intrusion detection systems. But now let's talk about some of the things that are frameworks. SASE. This is a term that's been used and thrown around recently in the last 2 years by Gartner, but that is a framework of how companies can actually use technologies like firewalls, SD-WAN, zero trust networking, all buzzwords in the industry, but it's a framework to how you can actually operate and protect your entities, your corporate entity or your customers. And CCPA, I threw that out there. California Consumer Protection Act. California taking the lead on how you protect customers' data, and they have driven a whole bunch of initiatives within many companies in the US to protect consumer data, and also having stipulations that if the consumer wants to pull their data out of your systems, you have to do so within a certain span of time. Now, and also, let me take a step back, and also in Europe, you also have the same exact thing called GDPR. So the pros, right, of what information cybersecurity is about: protecting your personal data, your intellectual property, sometimes even your physical assets, right? Think about how many Ring cameras protect you when somebody says, oh, I can't steal that Amazon box off your front stoop because there's a Ring camera there. They eventually still do it, especially here in Philadelphia. But this is something that technology, cybersecurity brings to the table. Now, the con around it, and I've been in cybersecurity for a very long time, is that sometimes it just increases your time to do your work. And I call this the test of patience, because somebody's like, okay, why do I have to do 5 to 6 different passwords? Why do I have to sign in 3 times? Why do I have to do whatever? And sometimes it impacts your work because there's extra layers of security that you have to go through in order to complete certain tasks. But that is the trade-off of actually protecting your personal data, your intellectual property, and your physical assets. So then the next thing we talk about, and I think this is where Steve was going with in the beginning, is the when and where. When do we implement information security and where? And really, it's now. And so I'm going to talk about 4 quick stories, 2 of which were actually personal, and then 2 that were in the news, right? So test equipment on the open internet, who knew? So this happened when I was a security engineer at a previous company, and they did automated test equipment, especially on DSL lines. And so in Germany, they had deployed a test server, which was not actually patched to our gold standard in corporate. And I got a phone call stating that somebody had actually hacked the server and had made it a porn server. And even the and now this was actually a porn site that was being advertised on the dark web. The great, or I shouldn't say the great thing, the interesting thing is the server was still seen in DNS and through a web page as being belonging to our company's domain, which now says that our company serves porn in Germany. And so immediately they shut down the server. They sent me the hard drives. I had to do the forensics. I had to do a whole write-up if we were going to go take any legal action or had to report it to the FBI. But that's just an example of a poorly patched system sitting on the internet being used for different purposes. And we've also seen this a lot when you start talking about machines being compromised and used as distributed denial of service bots to take down certain websites or corporate networks across the world. And a lot of times it's gotten to the point where those machines that are compromised are part of a network that you then sell, some of these hackers sell as a service. So if you want to DDoS somebody out there on the internet, there's a service for you. The second story was, can I have a samosa with my ransomware? So I am a first generation American. My family's from the British West Indies, and I love eating curry. And so my local Indian restaurant, and I became very good friends with the owner, came up to me one day and says, Joe, somebody has ransomed my system. And basically, he was no longer doing credit card transactions in the store. He was doing all the credit card transactions over the internet because it was a lower cost for him. And somebody had broken into his machine, and I think they were holding him hostage for about $10,000. I gave him some suggestions, and by the time I talked to him, he was like, look, I just paid the money because I need to get my business up and running and start processing transactions as quickly as possible. So again, that's a situation where, poorly patched system, critical to his business, somebody broke in, held him for $10,000. And this was in the early days before ransomware was talked about greatly on the internet. Now it just seems to be commonplace, but this was, I want to say almost 7-8 years ago. And so when you think about it, in the digital life, technology is paramount for us to conduct our businesses, to live our life, any types of transactions, to ask for services. And if there's any hiccup to the system, there are ripples throughout our lives and the lives of joining businesses. So let's talk about that. Global implication, Maersk and NotPetya. So NotPetya, for example, was part of the cyber warfare that was going on between, I want to say, not Russian, Ukraine. That's more recent, but I can't remember the two countries. And as part of that cyber warfare, there was some code that actually hit the internet, which was NotPetya. Maersk, which is a global logistics company, got hit. Now, they had not patched their Active Directory servers around the world. And basically, the entire global network for Maersk was locked out. Now, we're talking about global logistics. So we're talking about ships in the ocean carrying goods that get delivered to a port like Staten Island in New York, that they get picked up and delivered to an end location. And nobody knew where anything had to go. So you had food rotting right on the docks. You had people not actually able to start their invoices because they didn't have anything coming in. They couldn't do business because they ran out of stock. All this just-in-time logistics completely wiped out. And how was Maersk able to actually recover from this? There was an Active Directory server that was in, I believe, Nigeria. And it just so happened the link between Nigeria and the rest of the global network had gone down. And so they realized they had a pristine copy of their Active Directory server in Nigeria. They actually had to have a gentleman fly from Nigeria to the UK. He could not come into customs because he did not even have any of the paperwork to enter the UK. He literally handed the hard drive over I don't know, over some area, over a rope or whatever, to a team in the UK, which they then took back to their headquarters to rebuild their entire Active Directory because everything was down. They lost everything. And again, it was unpatched servers that they could have remediated, I think 2 years ago, and upper management kept on kicking it down the road. So another story, this is I call this the oldie but goodie. And this was under the Reagan years, where the Russians had been stealing some code from the US. And the United States actually became aware of it. And what they did is they actually put bad code into the code that was stolen. So what ended up happening is when the Russians ran it in their system, it actually took their systems offline and actually created an ecological disaster in certain parts of Russia. So again, very interesting in terms of statecraft between nations. One thing we've heard about also is, like, for example, when the Iranians were enriching uranium, that the US actually broke into their system supposedly and caused their centrifuges to spin up at such a high rate that they all broke down. So when we start talking about, again, that digital life, our businesses that we run, the systems that we use to do whatever our work is, and if somebody actually hacks into it, takes control, or steals information, how that has an impact to the overall company or our personal digital lives. And so now we get into the why. And these are some stats that have been around. I pulled this, that you could find them almost anywhere on the internet. These are a little bit dated, but 87% of all enterprises are now adopting a hybrid cloud strategy, because some of them are saying, I need to move my assets to the cloud in order, because I don't have enough personnel. But here's the funny thing. They are now finding that poor security practices that were on site are just being replicated in the cloud now. So it doesn't really make a difference if it's on premise or in the cloud. You still need to adopt the same position in securing your assets. 48% of all employees will work remotely at some of the time. So now that demark of saying I secured just the enterprise has changed, because you have to actually move to where the user is, which is at home or maybe out of a coffee shop now, because now we have this blended lifestyle of working in a physical office or working at home. 93% of the enterprises will adopt IoT technology. So now we're talking about your light bulbs. We're talking about your smart switches, your smart outlets. Those are all threat vectors into an organization. If you're not securing that, somebody could take over your light bulb. Doesn't sound like much, but depending on if they flip that switch on and all of a sudden you actually run their bill, that's one way to look at it. But what if it's a water meter and you do theft of the water, and then they are able to somehow or another tweak that water meter that doesn't look like you're actually using as much? There are many ways that IoT technology can be abused. And then we start looking at some of the real numbers. Cybercrime expected to reach 6 trillion. There's a shortage of 360,000 cybersecurity workers in the US. This is where you come into play. Hackers attack every 39 seconds, daily average. The cost of an average data breach is 3.92 million. And there's lots of staffing gaps, and that you can actually provide it with a cost-effective, comprehensive layer security offering. And that's also the consulting that comes along with it, with you as a security person. So when I go into another why I want to talk about, and this is actually from a cyber report from CompTIA that Wayne is going to talk about later, I think they nailed it with this statement, that one of the hallmarks of a digital age is the rapid pace of change, right? My mom's in the old school, my daughter's in the new school. The ability to procure core technology, components at lower costs, and the ability to connect individuals around the globe have dramatically accelerated the capacity for innovation. And there's often a sense that businesses need to constantly adapt or face irrelevance. And so now for companies that are out there, if they're not able to adapt to new technology so they stay relevant, they will disappear. But even if they make that jump and adapt, they still need to secure that new technology, because if somebody's able to break in and theft of service, theft of intellectual property, they will also become irrelevant. And so the next, the 5 Wh's, the next part is the how. And this is where I want to hand it off to Wayne, because CompTIA, I met Wayne last week preparing for this. And I think from our discussion, he can definitely talk to you about how you actually engage these customers, how you talk to them about security, how you feel comfortable about talking about security to these customers, and also understanding their problems and getting them to yes, how to protect their environment and how to protect their intellectual property. And with that, I'd like to hand it off to Wayne. I think you're on mute.
I thought I had unclicked it. Maybe my finger was a little too fast for my mouse. I don't know. But thanks, Joe, for that. So hi, everybody. So I know there was one good question there in the chat on cloud provider as Joe was walking through his 5 W's and 1 H. Please, if you have anything else, Joe's going to be watching chat now too, and Lisa is out there as well. But talking about the how, right? This is sometimes the most difficult thing for solution providers, any organization, quite honestly, to understand. Okay, great. So you're talking to us about this cybersecurity stuff. How do I get started? Or if I've already started, what's next at the end of the day? And so to get started, if you have not yet gone down this cybersecurity journey, you know, the one thing I put in the chat in response to the cloud provider question, right, is find a framework that will help your business. And I use the analogy with Joe and Steve as we're kind of walking through this, right? The best thing you can do for yourselves today is make sure that you start with your own organization first. Don't try to go out and think you have a full understanding of cyber if you're not ready to sell, or try to solve for some of the challenges with your customers if you haven't gone through and experienced some of this on your own, right? Start with yourself. It's the easiest thing to do. And your customers, prospects, they're going to ask you, have you done this? So the answer to that question better be a yes at the end of the day, right? So start with yourself. You know, understand your business objectives. What is it you're trying to accomplish? As Joe mentioned, you know, one of the cons with cyber is, what's the impact on my users? What's the impact on their functionality, their ability to do their job today? And I completely agree, right? You know, have a look at some of those things. Talk to your folks, right? Define policies and figure out what it is that folks should be doing. You're probably already doing a lot of things today, but I would strongly recommend that everybody, if you do not have a formalized process today for policy inside your organization, please document it, right? Especially if there's really small companies on the call today, or even, you know, I won't say maybe larger organizations, but you don't have policies defined. If you're on a growth trajectory, you're not going to have time in the future, as you start adding folks into the mix, to tell them what the policies are. It's a lot easier to have them documented, have them read through them, and then implement them in their own day-to-day work life, right? You will also find that maybe there's a better way of doing business. So depending upon how your processes are set up. Policy is one. Your people are very important. Your people have to be involved in your cybersecurity stuff. So let's make sure that you engage your folks and develop a cybersecurity culture, a security first culture and mindset inside your organization. Believe it or not, that is going to translate over to your prospects, and that is going to translate over to your existing customer base. And you're going to find very quickly those customers that are just not willing to take those next steps. Don't be afraid and I know this sounds almost counterintuitive because of a sales process, but don't be afraid to walk away. So as you're figuring out your business objectives and tying that back into your corporate risk or your organization's risk, you may find that your customers, if they're not following your best practices, are going to bring a lot more risk into your organization that you may not want to have at the end of the day. So how can CompTIA help with a lot of this, right? We have a lot of content. So everybody thinks of CompTIA as this whole certification stuff, which we do. We have a whole certification set, A+, Security Plus, the new Data Plus, right? If your organization is interested, there's also a Trustmark Plus. But we also have a career academy today, which a lot of folks may not be aware of, right? We actually lead classes and teach. We just received our 3-year accreditation for the Career Academy, by the way, this past Friday. Woohoo! That's a big deal, right? Because we can start doing the classes that folks go through the Career Academy they're actually accredited and can be used for other things. I'm sure that they've got a lot of cool plans and ideas there too. But we develop a lot of content. So one of the things Joe referenced was the 2021 State of Cybersecurity. We have others. We have trends in cybersecurity for managed service providers, which anybody on this call, if you have the CompTIA membership, can absolutely take advantage of. There are other reports, not just reports from US, but we also, because we're a global trade association, we have the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Benelux, Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg regions as well. We're working on getting back into a lot of the things in Asia Pacific as well over the course of this year. COVID kind of sidetracked us there for a little bit, but and then one of the other important things that we have, which I'm going to talk to you all about, is the CompTIA ISAO, right? So the ISAO is an information sharing and analysis organization. And let me, I'm not able to share my screen because of my security permissions.
Wayne, I have that ready here, Wayne, if you want me to.
Yeah, perfect. Yes, perfect, Steve. If you want to flop that up there for me, that would be awesome. Thank you. Next slide, if you don't mind. There you go. So an ISAO, right? So way back in the day, in 1998, and it really didn't become, so the challenge with this first bullet is that Homeland Security did not exist until after 9/11, right? So apologies for the typo on the slide. But information sharing and analysis centers were formed after 9/11, back in 2002, I believe, around the critical infrastructure: water, transportation, energy, maritime, space is now, they have their own ISAC. And organizations were also established a few years later, right, which is what the CompTIA ISAO is as an organization, information sharing and analysis organization. And organizations have a much broader focus. And for us, which you'll see on the next slide, it's really around solution providers, vendors, distributors that support those solution providers, all coming together for the betterment of the community as a whole, right? And so the goal here is to create that deeper, broader understanding through sharing amongst everything that makes up the community, as well as some information that we receive from those other information sharing and analysis centers as well, to help in that overall national security posture set. And if you all were paying attention a couple of weeks ago, the president actually signed a law. Yeah, it's a law. It's the Cyber Incident Reporting Act of 2022, which was part of an appropriations bill. In there, specifically in that act, it it defined what a managed service provider is to the federal government space. And I was just on a call this past Friday with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, right, which is part of DHS. And there's actually going to be a lot more regulation around managed service providers coming over the next year or two to fulfill that incident reporting stuff that I believe all organizations are going to have to follow now, especially if you're supporting any federal entities. So next slide, please, Steve. Thank you. So this is who we serve, right? First and foremost, we serve the service provider community, the solution providers, the technology vendors, integrators, distributors. So that would be the VARs, right? As well as business technology consultants. Go ahead for the next one. And really what this gives you is the ability to not only receive threat intelligence and threat reports specific to the to your industry vertical, right? But we receive a lot of things, again, with our relationships with some of the other analysis centers, multi-state, right? So that would be state, local, territorial, and tribal governments, understanding what they have going on and how that kind of relates back into your community as a whole. So the goal here is to not only provide information to you, but also receive information from you, because we're only as good as our weakest link, and individuals like yourselves, organizations that you take care of, you may end up finding something weird inside your environment, right? And logs, something popped really weird on your screen, and you're looking to find out more information. You can actually submit that into our threat submission forum set. And you will have an analyst actually able to look at that information and provide you analysis on what that is, or if it's part of a broader picture. And then with that information, we can actually share that out to the broader audience to better protect everybody in this case. So, and that last bullet there, I cannot stress that enough, right? So as part of the membership, you are actually demonstrating both social and cybersecurity responsibility by belonging to our organization at the end of the day. Next slide. So we have forums that you can all participate in. We also have TrueStar, which is now Splunk Intelligence Management. Splunk actually acquired TrueStar last year. So a lot of that correlation engine. So for those of you that don't have cybersecurity staff, we can actually correlate a lot of the log information for you and help in finding some of these things. Next slide, please, Steve. Those are some of the industry partners that we work with on a regular basis. You can see the platform partners down there at the bottom. Security Scorecard, Splunk, which was formerly TrueStar, and the ITISAC has been a huge supporter and also helps provide a lot of our analysis with our threat reports. But we certainly couldn't do it without any of those industry partners that you see up above there as well. Because, I mean, having an information sharing and analysis organization or center, quite honestly, takes a lot of capital at the end of the day. And fortunately, the membership in CompTIA now will include the ISAO membership as part of the member benefit. So if you want to go to the next slide, Steve. Thank you. So if you're interested, wanting to learn more about how the ISAO can integrate into your organization, please email membership@comptia.org. Let us know in the chat. We can actually, Lisa and I can kind of walk through some of the things a little bit more in depth and take you down that path too. So with that, Joe, do we want to?
Let's do some Q&A with Mr. Steve.
Well, I appreciate both of you Joe and Wayne sharing some of your wealth of information and really setting ground zero on how to get started with this. And if I heard you loud and clear, it starts at the people level, at the person level, on awareness and having an understanding of what the best practices are that we need to implement in our businesses before we start looking at policies and tools and things like that, right? So let me ask you guys, first of all, let me say thank you to CompTIA again. This ISO membership to our partners, CompTIA has provided that to us complimentary as part of our DE&I program. I'd highly encourage our partners to get involved as soon as you possibly can. We will follow up after today's presentation with information on how to begin your CompTIA membership, and then also the ISO membership, which Wayne just talked about, is a part of CompTIA, how to get started with that community and how to start reaping the benefits of that membership. But let me ask both of you from your experience and your perspective, right? If this is maybe the first time I'm hearing about cybersecurity like this, or maybe it's been a daunting subject because it seems scary, and it also seems like there's so much to cybersecurity. I think it's almost like saying, what is marketing? Marketing is a very broad brush that you can stroke with a paintbrush, and I think cybersecurity is in that same position. There's so many things that fit within cybersecurity. But where do I get started today if I feel like this is really overwhelming? If I need a little bit of mentoring, hand-holding, coaching along the way to get started, maybe I'll pose this question to you, Wayne. Does the CompTIA organization and the forums and the memberships there, can that help kind of ease me into more of a better understanding of cybersecurity?
Yes, absolutely. For sure. We have a lot of content available out there for the individual contributor to actually pick up and understand where to get started, how to get started at the end of the day. And I'm going to drop a link into the chat here in just a second. This is by no way an endorsement of ConnectWise, but I do want to share with everybody, they have free, no charge, a way of understanding an easy to read, easy to follow framework, along with some playbooks, right? Regardless of where you are in the cybersecurity journey, if you're just starting, there's a fundamental playbook on how to implement those things that you need. And then there's an advanced, so when you're ready to take the next step after you've done some of those things, and then there's a master kind of level. They are in the process of revamping this stuff too, but this again is a free resource. So whether or not you take advantage of the CompTIA membership for the 1 year that Steve's going to send everybody a code for, but or not, I really don't care. Right, this is one of those best ways to get started. And the only reason I'm bringing that up is because I did help kind of author some of that stuff. Right, at the end of the day.
Thank you, Wayne. Now, you talked about a very key part here, and that was before you start selling some of this cybersecurity solution, start implementing a cybersecurity practice within your own business. And I see Joe shaking his head in agreement there. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe through CompTIA, you have also developed a checklist of some questions to help guide kind of that process and things to think about when you want to start implementing cybersecurity within your business. I believe it's like an MSP checklist that you might have. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that? So let's say I'm in the position of, I'm interested, this makes sense, I need to start implementing it, but I don't know exactly where to get started. What are the things to think about? Do you want to just kind of talk through that process and how you can provide tools to our partners?
Sure. So, and thank you for that. There is a checklist that is available, right? And again, it's not for the faint of heart either. And the one thing I want to stress here is, if nothing else, if you get nothing else out of this presentation, just get started. You don't have to flip a switch and go all the way to the end. It's not gonna happen, right? This takes time. It's a journey. It's not a destination. And so the checklist actually helps you clearly define because you have to do some introspection here, right? You have to understand what your business objectives are at the end of the day. You have to understand what your business risk is today. And if you don't understand those two things, then that's where you need to start, quite honestly, at the end in order to get started down this path. And that's where the checklist is going to help kind of focus your attention and effort on those two things specifically.
Perfect. Thank you, Wayne. And to our partners on the call, want to be respectful of everyone's time. We've got about 5 minutes left. If you do have any questions, please put them in the chat section. You can continue to post questions in the chat section after today's call, and we'll make sure that both Wayne and Joe take a look at those questions and provide answers to them. Joe, want to direct this question to you. Let's say we're in the position where we're talking to customers about that, but a customer either says, I don't think there's a need for security, I've got a firewall, and they kind of leave the conversation there. As a partner, what would you say in terms of resources and subject matter experts that they can lean on from someone like a Comcast or other providers that they sell?
Oh, that's a good question. So if somebody just said to me, I have a firewall, I wouldn't even end the conversation there. I'm one of those folks that likes to understand when you use certain words, what are you actually saying? Because somebody can say, one person says firewall, and it can mean a completely different thing to somebody else. So I like to continue the conversation because I really want to understand almost to that minutia, what is it that you actually have? And then I also like to talk to, are you sure? I wouldn't say, are you sure? Because that's a dead end if you're talking to customers, but really talk about what is your business about and what is your daily life and how do we protect your daily life? And I've actually had one of those conversations with a customer recently. But if we're talking about resources from CompTIA and also within Comcast, we do have engineers who have these high level conversations. CompTIA can also provide you some of that background as to why you're even asking those questions, because that's where you want to drive towards. I'll give an example. A customer I was talking to, they was saying, I was like, just offhand, I said, so, it's Monday, you have like what, 3-4 new acquisitions? He's like, no, it's usually like 5 or 10. I was like, oh, so you want to make sure that you can just roll them into your network as quickly as possible and secure. He said, that's exactly it. So now I can have a conversation of, how do you do it today? How can we make it better for you? And that all was driven from him waking up on Monday, talking to me and just saying, every week it's a new day and the amount of work I have is just overwhelming and I need to make it easy, right? And that's why we sell technology, because it makes things easy, but we have to make sure it's secure.
And I think, from both CompTIA and Comcast, Masergy's perspective, we want to let you, our partners, know that you're not alone in the journey as you go through learning more about cybersecurity, but more importantly, as you're talking to your customers about cybersecurity, lean on the resources that are available to you through Comcast, Masergy, and CompTIA. We won't let you have that conversation alone if you're not comfortable in having that conversation with your customer. Knock on the doors of your sales engineers and of your partner sales managers and the resources that they have. They can certainly help guide those conversations with you and help architect the right type of solutions for your customers' needs. We're running out of time, but we got one last question for you, Joe, that came through using your Indian restaurant example. So we've, by the way, I didn't know you were Caribbean, so we're gonna have to talk after this call here about some of the foods. But
absolutely.
So how do you position this to a customer? They do a one-time fee. They buy these IoT devices, right? It's a one-time cost. They buy these devices. How do you position to them that there's a monthly recurring charge now to secure the access to those devices?
So I probably wouldn't start with the conversation, and this is from my days of being actually an account manager. I wouldn't start the conversation of MRC to secure your devices. I would start off with, do you know what your devices are actually doing? It's almost like, do you know what your kids are doing when you're not around you? It's one of those things, right? And what happens is other parents that get back to you. So guess what? If they are consuming a service you have, let's just look at your logs. Let's just see what's communicating in and out. And do you know what that is? And if you don't know what that is there something being stolen that you don't know about? I mean, it's very simple to just sit back and just watch it, the communication channels, and just say, let's have a talk about what's happening right now, period. And then if you actually know the devices, just talk about these are some of the known vulnerabilities at them. And it's not even talk. So you don't start off with money, right? Because everybody's, oh, you're just here to get more money. Look, I'm here to help you secure your environment. And here's the big thing. As much as we talk about you shouldn't do X, Y, or Z, it is still on the customer to decide if they're willing to accept that risk. Just like Maersk said, it's okay, we don't have to patch our Active Directory servers, and they kick the can down the road, and then all of a sudden they end up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. There it is.
Right.
And you lose billions of dollars within days.
Right.
There it is.
From a reputation perspective as well, right?
Yes.
So
you can't even calculate that at times.
No,
reputation.
No, you cannot. That's right.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Wayne and Joe, thank you for sharing with our DE&I partner community about cybersecurity, about the importance of where it starts, right? I think the myth is it starts at heavy solutions and architecting and all that, but it really starts at the human level, at people and personnel that you have. So we thank you both for presenting on that today. To our partners, we'd like to hear from you. Drop some notes in the chat section if you found this useful today and you'd like to dig in a little bit deeper. Maybe we ask Wayne and Joe to come back and do a presentation on some other deeper things within cybersecurity, and maybe that's implementation. Maybe it's looking at different types of cybersecurity practices. As Joe mentioned earlier, it's a layered approach to give you the maximum protection. So no one thing will make you foolproof, but one thing is better than zero things. I think we'd all agree on that. So we'd like to hear from you. Thank you for joining us today. We'll be publishing some supplementary information that both of these gentlemen have talked about, some State of the Union reports, some stats, some things for you to be aware of. We'll get more information out to you about the CompTIA and the ISO membership so that you can start those in the very near future. And look out within the next week or so for your May newsletter from the Comcast Business and Masergy DE&I program. If you have any questions about today's presentation, please reach out to your Comcast Business Ambassador or your Comcast Business Partner Sales Manager or your Masergy Comcast Business Partner Sales Manager. And we thank you for joining us today. We'll be in touch soon. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. Take care.